Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to COVID, business continuity, resilience, emergency management, cybersecurity, anything that can help you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. A couple of quick announcements. November 2nd and 3rd, I will be in London, England, speaking at the BCI World Conference, co-presenting, I should say, with Margaret Millett at a keynote and Raising the Bar, Resilience and Executives. Really looking forward to that. And then a couple of weeks later, I will be at the Continuity and Resilience Today conference. We will be broadcasting live with James Green, who many of you will know from the show, our monthly show of This Week in Business Continuity. And that is also the place that I will get to see today's guest in person for the first time in 3 years, I guess, almost 3 years?
I think it definitely is 3 years.
Yep. I'd like to welcome to the show, Regina Phelps. Regina, welcome back.
Alex, oh my gosh, what a treat. It's been a month. I look forward to this every month.
But at least in a couple of weeks, we'll see each other face to face. That'll be nice.
It's going to be way fun.
Yeah, real fun. Person. You are real. You're not just a picture on my screen anymore.
Yeah, right. Great.
Well, we made it through only 1 month where we didn't talk about infectious diseases.
And that's in almost 3 years, right?
Yeah, because we are in about 30th episode or 30th month of you and I talking.
Wow.
And we only made it through one where we didn't have to talk about COVID and other diseases, and that was last month.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, looks like we're going to be talking about that today.
Yes, indeed. There is a lot going on in the infectious disease aspects of the world, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. And I thought it was good that we might talk about kind of what to think about for the fall and winter, which of course historically has been a time of great respiratory illness in general before the pandemic, not just with adults, with kids as well. And we are off to a ripping start here in North America in this, both our flu season and our RSV season. So I want to spend time initially talking about the real big problem we're having right now, also in Canada, I saw as well, which is diseases that are affecting kids in particular. RSV is the name of the virus, and I'll talk about that. And then we'll dig into influenza, both in birds and humans. And of course, then we'll talk about COVID and what to be thinking about, and the new big list of subvariants, whose initials are just going to challenge every one of us because they're so different, because they are subvariants of Omicron. So it's not BA something, it's XBB and BQ and all of that. And then we'll begin to talk a little bit about what the long-term impacts of the pandemic are, and we'll kind of leave it at that. So as always, I'm going to show my deck of slides here, and we'll get started. And as always, Alex, I want you to give me your perspective from Canada, because it's really important to hear what you're thinking about and seeing up there. So this is a completely disgusting slide selected for a reason.
It is.
For
those on Voice America, it's a picture of someone coughing, and you can see all the vapor drops.
Oh, yeah. It's disgusting, right? I remember the first time I really started seeing these, and this was actually in the first build up to the first avian flu crisis that I really remember, which started in about 2003. And they would just have all of these images of this sneezing, coughing, spewing. But it's a really great reminder that respiratory illnesses are coming from either droplets you can see, as you see in this individual, but also something called aerosols, which are very, very small particles that you can't see but remain floating in the air for up to hours. And that's kind of an important thing to keep in your mind as I talk through all the things I'm going to talk about this month. So the question is really what to expect in this fall and winter, and I do have a lot to give you to think about. And I'm going to focus on three things. I'll talk about RSV, which is primarily thought of as a childhood disease, but also affects older people severely. I'll talk about influenza, both avian and human. And I'll talk about SARS-CoV-2. And then I want to talk at the end about really what the impacts of the pandemic are globally. And the things that are now really starting to sink in or kind of getting baked in, if you will, to societies around the world. And it's really what I'm calling the long tail of COVID. And today, what I'll talk about at the end of our session is really talking about the issue related to the impact of healthcare systems and why that is such a big deal. So, what's the crystal ball have for this fall and winter? Now, I'm not going to be projecting, what I believe is going to happen, and you should be really counting this. I have really pulled together comments from many, many healthcare professionals who I follow, both physicians and epidemiologists. And overwhelmingly, they will all tell you, if they're really being honest, that they actually really don't know. There is no thing that's baked in stone that's going to actually happen that anybody can point to. We can all, with hindsight, say that after it's over. Oh, yeah. But I want to just give you an overview about what you should be thinking about so that you're not flat-footed. And this is really not only just for you in your business world as a continuity professional, but also from a perspective of your personal life and your family. Because, everybody, at least in America, I don't know about in your parts of the world, are all planning on big holidays and everybody's going traveling. And that's what you hear, is that not like there's going to be an issue that we're going to have to be thinking about people's health, but it's that we are having the first big holiday after now that COVID is over. Do you get that sense in Canada?
Yes, most definitely. And I'll admit I'm a little bit a part of that as well, because I'm going home for Christmas this year.
Good for you.
And I already mentioned I'm going to be in the UK in a week.
Right.
So I am a part of that myself, and I know others that are doing it too.
And I guess what my point of my conversation is to say that I think is perfectly fine. And that people, what they need to be thinking about always is their personal risk tolerance. And as I talk through all the things we'll talk about today, you also need to think about what you're really willing to do and not do. And that's always a trade-off. And certainly if you're under the age of 50, your chances of having a serious outcome are a lot less. It's only really when you're above 50. And then as you get older and older, every time you go through another decade, then of course, then your chances of having a bad outcome increase, regardless of what the illness is. But I think it's important that we just reflect that nobody can tell you what's going to happen. But my goal is to give you kind of an idea of what could happen. So I'm going to start with a virus that's called RSV. And this is really a critical virus for children in particular, and also older adults. Now, we in the United States are already seeing astronomical numbers of RSV. And I didn't do any searching for Canada, so I don't know if you're seeing that. But here in the United States, there already are many of the children's hospitals have already started to set up field hospitals in the parking lot because it has gotten so bad already. And this is a very common illness in children and also in older adults. And you very commonly might get RSV several times in your adult life, and it's just a typical cold. But for many small kids and for people with a lot of health issues that are older, it can actually be life-threatening. But the fact that they're already establishing field hospitals in some of the big cities and the big children's hospitals, I find is pretty stunning. So RSV is actually, as I mentioned, is very common. It's mild in most people. Most people recover in a week or two, but it can be super serious for infants, anybody under the age of 2, and anybody who's older. It is almost a guarantee anywhere in the world that by the time you're 2 years old, you've at least had one RSV infection. It's so common. And now that kids are again going to schools, they're not wearing masks, and they haven't had much exposure to these viruses for the last 2 years. That's why it's expected that this will be a brutal season for children and older folks. The season usually starts in November. Here in October, the month of October in the United States, it has been already off the charts and only expected to get worse. Now, what it does is it causes an inflammation in the lung, but not in the bronchial, which is right here in the center, your bronchus that comes down from your throat, and then it breaks off into the lungs. This is actually in the little tiny bronchioles that actually causes bronchiolitis, which is this inflammation of these really small airways, which is why it can be so difficult for young kids and older adults, because they have a harder time breathing and getting good air exchange. And that's really a big deal. And this is a really good diagram that shows you what the problem is that the bronchial area becomes inflamed, but what is really inflamed are the bronchioles. And they actually get really congested, and it's very difficult for them to have adequate air exchange. And so that's a big deal in kids. Now, this particular problem is worse for people with chronic health issues. So again, as I mentioned, older adults, again, go through the list of the usual things. So if you have lung disease or people that have had congestive heart failure or heart-related issues, it can be a big concern. And the bad news is there's no vaccine for this. It changes a lot. And now there's a lot of interest in trying to make a vaccine, and it's been tried for many, many years. Very likely, I would expect an mRNA vaccine will come out. But this is actually a really big deal. Are you seeing this at all in the media in Canada?
I have heard of it up here. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing a lot of reporting on it yet. But I have heard about it up here. And I do know a lot of my neighbors have little kids, and a lot of them have been suddenly getting sick. And somebody did mention that, and I think they used the fancy name for RSV, which is probably why it went over my head at the time.
Right.
But they think they had this as well. So I know it is impacting, and I know a lot of other kids who have had colds recently as well. So they may have had some sort of degree to the of this.
Well, especially for, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, but it hasn't seemed to have hit the big headlines yet, but I think it's heading towards it.
Yeah, I think when you have children, of course, and you're the adult and the caretaker, kids are, you want to comfort them, you're holding them, I mean, the chances of you not getting sick is pretty slim, right? So it's very common for parents, and especially new parents, that once their kid starts relating with other children, then it's, diseases one after another, because of course, the kid gets sick because they haven't had that exposure in their immune system, and they, of course, infect a parent really quickly. The reason it's really a big deal in kids is because their airways, of course, are so small, right? And so once they get inflamed and they have a very difficult time breathing, it's really a problem. So RSV is a big challenge for infants and young children that's under the age of 2. There's about 58,000 infections every year on an average basis, and 58,000 hospitalizations. That's a lot of kids. And that they already believe we will far exceed that this year in the United States. So either infants that are premature, infants that are, again, under the age of 6, any infant that has any kind of lung condition in particular, or some sort of congenital heart disease, kids with weakened immune systems, which could be from a congenital disease, but also from things like cancer treatments, and then those folks that have any kind of neuromuscular disorder. So it's really a big concern for parents, and something that I'm sure that many of our listeners are concerned about with their kids. But it's not just them, it's older folks. And this is going to sound a little bit in some ways like COVID, right? Where it's the middle age group are the ones that have usually a milder illness. Thank goodness there's not such a thing as long RSV like there is long COVID. But for those, it's very, very similar. So RSV infections are really problematic for older adults. There's about 177,000 people here in the US that are hospitalized every year who are older with RSV, and about 14,000 of them die. So it's a big deal. And again, it's over 65, weakened immune systems, chronic heart or lung diseases. And the problem is it can lead to pneumonia and congestive heart failure. And it's also more problematic for people with asthma and for people with COPD. And I never used to think much
Mm.
about that, but I was diagnosed with asthma in my early 60s. And now every time I see something like that, I go like, ooh, oh no.
Yeah, and my mom has COPD, so
Oh, does she?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll
Mm-hmm.
be watching out for that and talking to her soon.
Yeah, exactly. And so that, gets to the question about how to protect yourself. And this is going to sound very much like COVID, right? Because remember, it's a respiratory illness. So when you're talking to your mom, right, it's how's it transmitted? Just think of that slide I showed at the very beginning, which with all of that spraying coming out of somebody's mouth, it's both big droplets, but also the aerosols, right? It's also spread, COVID is not spread this way. It's spread by fomites. So you cough into your hand, you touch the doorknob, you're walking right behind me, you touch the doorknob, then you scratch your nose, and then you're helping to introduce that virus into your respiratory system. So where COVID, we weren't concerned. Initially, we were concerned about what I called, cleaning theatrics, right? Where we cleaned everything to death. But this is an issue with RSV and influenza, is it spread by fomites, which is objects, as well as droplets and aerosol transmission. And then also direct contact. So again, if you're holding the face, holding a sick child and you're kissing them on their chin or their face, that's going to be a really good opportunity for you to become sick. And of course, you're going to continue to do that, of course, but it just means that you have to just be aware that that's going to be a potential infection source for you if you're a parent. So all the things that you do to protect yourself from RSV is hand washing. Remember this all from COVID, 20 seconds. Cleaning objects, which again, we didn't have to do after we figured out the science for COVID. And then also avoiding close contact. Not possible, I understand completely if you're a parent, but something that you want to keep in the back of your mind. So all those cleaning wipes that maybe you bought or spray solutions, you can bring them back this winter because it will be helpful not only for RSV, but also for influenza. So keep that in mind.
I still have lots of hand sanitizer.
I do too. I have tons of hand sanitizer. I've got still boxes of masks, but I'm still wearing them here.
Me too.
And I've got lots of, wipes, all kinds of wipes. Right? Yeah. So that gets to the next one, which is...
Let's take a break before we jump into avian influenza.
All right.
We're talking with Regina Phelps today, and we will be right back. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.